For the first time since Game 5 of the NLCS in late October, the New York Mets play a home game at Citi Field.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. And speaking of Gametime, it's opening day again, home opener for the New York Mets, and also opening day in low A, high A, double A. So I'm going to be breaking down all of those rosters later on throughout the show. But first and foremost, we got to talk about the big league club and Mets fans getting to watch Juan Soto and the 2025 New York Mets for the first time at Citi Field. This is going to be an awesome game and series to see the excitement and buzz that Mets fans bring to the ballpark. I was able to experience it in Miami. There's a lot of Mets fans there. It felt like a home game, but more like a home game similar to the crowds you'll see at Clover Park in spring training, not what you would see at Citi Field. It was, maybe 5,000 to 10,000 Mets fans. I don't really know the exact range. I never saw the attendance there in Miami. You're going to see, whatever it is, packed out ballpark, 40,000 for this first game, and hopefully throughout the rest of the weekend against the Blue Jays. It's a lot of storylines to follow. Juan Soto, of course, getting to make his first official introduction to this particular New York crowd. Pete Alonso has a little bit of a homecoming after that long free agent saga. The last time Pete Alonso's name was chanted at Citi Field, it was for Amazing Day, the Fan Fest, which led to those incredible quotes by Steve Cohen about the frustrating free agent process. Well, Pete's back, and he's riding the high off of an incredible series in Miami. Francisco Lindor, sure to get some ovations after an MVP caliber season and great playoff run he had last year. And all those guys from the 2024 Mets, the Jesse Winker, Brandon Nimmo, Starling Marte, anyone who's in the lineup is obviously going to get a ton of ovations throughout the game. Mark Vientos, of course. And I think for Vientos in particular, I'm hoping that getting some home cooking, getting in front of Mets fans can maybe be a shift and a different feeling for him because he struggled so much offensively on that road trip. I think getting back home, getting in a new environment, maybe that'll get Vientos to break out of his very early and small sample size, but his early slump to start the season. Who's going to pitch for the Mets today for a home opener? None other than Tylor Megill. It is remarkable how many opening day type starts Megill has gotten in his young career for a guy that, is always on the outside looking in, coming into spring training. As we talked about throughout spring training, Tylor Megill is inevitable. He's always going to find his way into that rotation somehow. In 2022, it was replacing Jacob deGrom, who would have started on opening day but got hurt. So instead, it was Tylor Megill who got the opening day start in D.C. The Mets won that game as Tylor Megill went 5 scoreless, allowed just 3 hits, no walks, 6 strikeouts. The Mets scored 4 runs for Megill to put him in line for the victory. The Nationals only scored 1 run in a game that ended up being a 5-1 victory for the Mets. The 1 run they scored, solo homer off the bat of some guy named Juan Soto. So that was 2022 when Megill started his season in an opener. 2023, Mets opened up in Miami, then they played in Milwaukee, came home on April 7th for their first game of the season at Citi Field. Who got the start? Tylor Megill. And what did he do? 6 scoreless, allowed 3 hits, 2 walks, 3 strikeouts. Mets won 9-3 against the Marlins that day. Starling Marte, Francisco Lindor, and Pete Alonso all homered. Last year was the one time that Tylor Megill did not get an opener of some kind. Mets opened up the season at home, and Megill started the 3rd game of the season. Now here we are, 2025, and once again, Megill gets a home opener. So we'll see if he can go back to what he did the other two times where he opened up a season or a venue and puts up some scoreless frames. His first time out this season against the Astros was the one win the Mets got in Houston. He went 5 innings, allowed 1 run on 3 hits, 1 walk, 6 strikeouts. So we'll see how Tylor Megill does today. He threw 77 pitches in that last start. So I imagine you might be able to add a couple more to that. Maybe he's up to 90 pitches for this one. Can hopefully get the Mets through 6, maybe, if all things go well. The bullpen obviously all got a day of rest with the Mets not playing on Thursday. So most of the guys should be fresh and available. If I had to guess who might not be available, Jose Budo had an extended relief appearance on Wednesday. Huascar Brazaban threw a lot of pitches on Monday and then threw again on Wednesday, so maybe he's not available. I would think that maybe Max Kranick, after a couple days off, could be good to go again as the long relief option, and I'm sure you'll have all of Edwin Diaz, Ryan Stanek, Reed Garrett, AJ Minter. Those guys should be good to go, so the Mets should have a relatively rested pen able to go up against this Blue Jays lineup. Going up against Tylor Megill will be Kevin Gausman, the Blue Jays ace. Gausman started the year with a quality start against the Orioles, allowed 2 runs over 6 innings pitched, and got up to 97 pitches, so he is fully stretched out. Gausman had a down year last year, but the ERA was still in the 3.8s. Maybe you wouldn't call him the ace because they got Jose Barrios, but he's definitely been one of the more consistent starting pitchers in baseball for a long time now. So that's who the Mets will have to face today. Looking at the lineup for the Blue Jays, Andres Gimenez has been the star for them so far this season. Gimenez came over in an offseason trade from the Guardians. Of course, we all remember Andres Gimenez was a top prospect for the Mets. He was the headliner in the Francisco Lindor trade. He's made a good career out of it so far ever since that trade. Platinum Glove winner, had one monster season in Cleveland. Otherwise, has been closer to league average offensively while giving you that great glove at second base. So far this season, he's hitting 308, 400 on base, 731 slug, leading the team with 3 home runs, 6 RBIs, and 8 runs scored. He's also batting cleanup, which is a little bit of an odd look for a guy of Andres Gimenez's stature. But so far, he's fitting the billing with those 3 homers. Bo Bichette will lead things off for the Blue Jays typically. He's off to a good start, hitting 310. Vladdy and Anthony Santander have been batting second and third, respectively. They've started the season pretty much identical. They're both hitting 222. They've both gotten on base at a 300 clip as they've gotten 3 walks apiece. Vladdy has struck out 1 more time than Santander, 8 strikeouts, Santander 7. Neither has hit their first home run of the season. George Springer off to a fast start, hitting 429. Will Wagner, Billy Wagner's son, off to a fast start as well, hitting 389. The Blue Jays have scored 5 runs or more in 4 of their first 7 games. They have started the season 5-2. They split a 4-game set against the Orioles, and then they swept the Washington Nationals earlier this week. So this is a team that is coming off a down year, but they are hoping to compete, and they are off to a good start. They are not going to be an easy team to roll over. They're going to have a couple other good pitchers going in this series. One guy, a familiar face. Game 2 will be Chris Bassett versus Griffin Canning. Game 3 will be Bowden Francis, who had that great start against the Mets last year, which Francisco Lindor eventually broke up with that game-tying home run. And he'll be going up against David Peterson. Now, I'll be giving you more in-depth previews for each game of this series as they come, as I will continue to do shows every single day, throughout this weekend. So I have a show every single morning where I'll break down what happened the night before, or in this case, the afternoon before, as well as preview what lies ahead. But what I want to do throughout the rest of the show is look at opening day across the Mets farm system here. I'm going to break down where the top prospects have been assigned at each level, so you get a sense of what to watch for throughout the minor league season, which will officially be in full swing starting today as all those teams get their seasons underway after Syracuse has already been rolling for about a week now. So I'll start off with low A and high A in just a minute. First, though, a quick word from our sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site that's made for skilled trades, Supply House. Whether in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order at supplyhouse.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Just Ingredients. When it comes to fueling your body, quality matters. That's why Just Ingredients is changing the game with clean, high-quality products designed to support better health and peak performance. Just Ingredients offers an NSF-certified line of protein powder, electrolytes, pre-workout, and creatine, all rigorously tested to ensure they're free from substances banned by major athletic organizations. Just Ingredients has also partnered with two-time MVP Bryce Harper, who trusts their NSF-certified sports line to fuel his training and recovery. I personally love the strawberry limeade flavor of the pre-workout. That is my go-to before I go on any run. Drink a little bit of that and get a little more energy, feel better on my run and throughout. And I just also appreciate that they have wholesome, nourishing ingredients without the artificial junk. Visit justingredients.us/Bryce Harper and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for 20% off your first order. And for more wellness tips, follow at just.ingredients on Instagram. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 13,000 subscribers. I believe we're within 250 now, so I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. All right, so let's go through the rosters throughout the Mets farm system and break down where all the top prospects will start their season. We'll open it up with Low A, Port St. Lucie, and this team has a crowded infield. You got Jesus Baez, Jeremy Rodriguez, Marco Vargas, Trey Snyder, AJ Ewing, and Colin Houck, all set to be on this team. Jesus Baez, the one surprise for me because he did make it up to High A Brooklyn last year. He played outstanding in Low A, had a 782 OPS, 10 home runs, 14 doubles, 1 triple, was 8 for 8 on stolen base attempts. He got up to Brooklyn, still had an OPS above 780 in a limited sample, but tore his meniscus. Now he's back in Low A. He's still only 20 years old, so it's not crazy for him to be playing at this level. And my guess is this is a combination of trying to get his legs under him a little bit, and also Jacob Reimer, who we'll talk about in a minute, is playing in Brooklyn to start the season. He's healthy this year. He's a third base prospect as well, so maybe this allows both of those guys to play nearly every day at third base. Now, beyond Baez, who is a top 5 prospect in this system, according to my list, I think Baseball America had him at 4, if I'm not mistaken. I had him at 5. Beyond Baez, you have, again, Jeremy Rodriguez, Marco Vargas, Trey Snyder, AJ Ewing. Jeremy Rodriguez, the prospect the Mets got in the Tommy Pham trade. I have him as the 14th best prospect in this system. Other sites have him higher. Marco Vargas is the prospect the Mets got in the David Robertson trade. A slick fielding middle infielder. Hasn't done too much offensively, or at least didn't last year, but he was playing through some injuries. He still has some interesting upside, particularly due to the glove, but also an ability to get on base at a good clip. Not a guy that chases a lot at all. Trey Snyder got, I believe, late second round money out of the 4th or 5th round. Don't quote me on the round he was drafted in this past year, but a high school, prep bat that, could be a shortstop. Was drafted as a shortstop. I'm sure he might play all over a little bit, but definitely a name to watch this year. Someone that could have started at the Complex League. So it is of note that the Mets were ready to start him right in full season ball this year. AJ Ewing was the prospect the Mets used their comp pick for when Jacob deGrom signed with the Rangers. So that is his little claim to fame as a prospect. Ewing had a great run through the complex league last year, hit a bunch of home runs, ended up in Port St. Lucie where he wasn't as good, but still held his own. He was in the spring breakout game along with Jeremy Rodriguez, and I can't remember if Vargas was in it this past year. But AJ Ewing, I think, played outfield in that spring breakout game. So maybe that's one guy that will shift to the outfield to let some of these other guys play in the infield. But I don't know who the shortstop is on this team because I still haven't even talked much about Colin Houck, who was the Mets' first-round pick a couple years ago, but had a disastrous season last year. Does Houck just get that that shortstop nod again? I don't know. A little bit of a Freudian slip there. They got to find someone to play first base. Maybe you throw Houck there. Maybe you throw Baez there at times. Not sure how, again, this infield mix is going to look. I like to see Jeremy Rodriguez get a good amount of time at shortstop, but I'm also curious to see where Trey Snyder lands. And Marco Vargas, you don't want to completely remove the tool of playing shortstop from his kit. So we'll see how they work all those guys into the lineup. Now, a couple players who are rehabbing in St. Lucie to start the season, JT Schwartz. He'll probably play some first base to start things off, and then he'll eventually go back to either AA or AAA. Drew Gilbert is on rehab assignment at St. Lucie. That is a good piece of news there because we didn't really know where he was and when he was going to start playing. So hopefully he is in the lineup right away and can quickly prove health and get up to Syracuse because that team needs some top prospects that we can watch. And until Drew Gilbert and Ronnie Mauricio end up playing in AAA, there's pretty much nothing to watch offensively in Syracuse for the Mets right now. Outfielders Willie Fanas and Simone Juan are the only true outfielders on this roster. Simone Juan is the guy to watch here. Hit 7 home runs in 50 games in the Florida Complex League last year. Still only 19 years old. Big kid. Had a monster home run in a MLB spring training game just recently. So he is definitely a big name to watch. Another one is the starting catcher for the St. Lucie Mets, Diverson Gutierrez. Vincent Perozzo will be his backup his 3rd year in the Florida State League. Not much of a prospect. So for now, it's all about Gutierrez, who a few years ago was a top international signing for the Mets. Then they followed it up a year later by drafting Giovanni Rodriguez, who I believe got an extra $1 million in the bonus. I want to say that Rodriguez got like $2.8 million and Gutierrez got $1.9 million, but both of these guys, highly touted catchers out of Venezuela. Gutierrez had a good season last year, posted an .831 OPS overall. He raked in 14 games in the Dominican Summer League, raked in 15 games in the Florida Complex League, struggled offensively in 8 games played in Port St. Lucie. But this is going to be a year where he can really potentially rack up a bunch of games and showcase what he can do. 19-year-old catcher who's going to get a ton of runway because Giovanni Rodriguez starts the season on the 60-day IL with a hamstring injury. So don't expect to see him for some time, but hopefully in the second half of the season, you can see both Gutierrez and Rodriguez, or maybe Gutierrez is so great that he ends up advancing on to Brooklyn, although that would be an aggressive promotion at his age. More likely you keep these guys in St. Lucie for the whole year, especially because as we'll get to Brooklyn in a second, there are already a couple top catching prospects at that level. Pitchers of note, Matt Allen is the most noteworthy, will make his official return to the mound in a real game for the first time since 2019 on Sunday. Matt Allen, for those of you who aren't aware, was the Mets' top pitching prospect at one point in time. He was the guy the Mets basically catered their entire 2019 draft around, Bertie Van Wagenen's first draft, because he was this pitching prospect that could have been a high first rounder at the time, but ends up going later and getting first round money over slot. But it's been a couple of Tommy Johns for him. So a long road to get back on the mound. It'll be very exciting to see what he does. Other guys in this rotation of note, Nate Dome, 3rd round pick for the Mets out of Mississippi State in this last draft. You also have Will Watson, 7th round pick in this past draft. Moving up to high A, the Brooklyn Cyclones. You got catchers Ronald Hernandez and Christopher Suero, who will get a lot of run. Hernandez got a cup of coffee in Brooklyn last year, but primarily played in Port St. Lucie, where he hit .271, had a .362 on base. Not much power, but highly regarded for his defense, his leadership behind the dish, his game calling. This is the other prospect the Mets got in the David Robertson trade along with Marco Vargas. And he is right now a top 5 catching prospect in this system. You have Gutierrez and Rodriguez, who have the most upside. You have Kevin Parada, who we'll talk about in the next segment. You have Ronald Hernandez, who is definitely an interesting name to watch. Another one who I would still call a top 5 catching prospect in this system is Christopher Suero. Suero signed with the Mets in 2022, had never played catcher before signing. Last year, he had 25 great games in Port St. Lucie before he got moved up to Brooklyn. In Brooklyn, he posted a 703 OPS in 87 games. Very athletic, used to be an outfielder, still does play some outfield and some first base. So the Mets will probably move him around a little bit to get both Suero and Ronald Hernandez into the lineup. They can definitely have Suero play out in the field a little bit more instead of just behind the dish. And the question is going to be, how does he translate offensively to Brooklyn in his second year really playing there? Because he got a lot of time in Brooklyn last season. And if he does well, and you never know, maybe he'll join Kevin Parada and Binghamton at some point. The star of this infield to me is Boston Barrow. In my bold predictions for the Mets minor leaguers that I made, last week, my prediction for Boston Barrow was he was going to be the Mets player of the year this season. Remember, these are bold predictions. If and I said the other star here in Brooklyn to start the season, Carson Benge, I don't think that would have been a bold prediction because he was the Mets' first-round pick, very highly regarded. I think that he is the favorite to be the player of the season in this farm system. But Boston Barrow had a great spring breakout game, hit a home run, showcasing that power from the left side. I think that home run might have been left on left as well. I think he'll be the starting shortstop for this team, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see what he can do. Another guy that was over slot, signed out of high school, who has a lot of promise here. So we'll see what he can do. Jacob Reimer, I already mentioned, is going to play some third base after a lost season due to injury. Nick Rosselli was an 11th round pick by the Mets in this last draft, plays second base, corner outfield spots. Again, outfield, this is really where your top prospects are for this team because Carson Benge is a top 5 prospect in this system just based on how good he was going into the draft. He had some success in a very limited run last year in Port St. Lucie. Now we're going to see him jump right into high A, which I think is a aggressive, but it's the correct assignment for Carson Benge. I don't think he would have gotten much out of playing in Port St. Lucie other than just dominating that league. He's going to be challenged in high A, and it'll be good to see how he handles that challenge because if he does, I mean, this guy could be fast-tracked to the big leagues. I'm not necessarily saying this year, but, I mean, there's a world Benge plays a good amount of Double-A this year if he gets off to a great start in Brooklyn. So he's definitely the prospect on this roster. Although, again, I like Boston Barrow as a sleeper. Another kind of sleeper is Eli Serrano. He was the Mets' 4th-round pick this past year. Former two-way player in college, pitched and hit. Mets love him for his athleticism. He's 6'5", and he's been adding some muscle ever since getting drafted. Still just 21 years old. He'll be playing a lot of right field with Benge in center. They might even mix those guys up a little bit just to allow them each to get exposure to multiple positions. But Benge will be the primary center fielder. Serrano, see what that arm can do in right. It'll be interesting to see those two guys, having hopefully a lot of success together in this Brooklyn lineup. On the pitching side of things, a couple of relievers of note. Ryan Ammons, lefty reliever, was struck out 60 and 45 in a third innings pitched last year between St. Lucie and Brooklyn. Had a 2.18 ERA. Ryan Lambert is the pitching prospect that throws absolute gas. We talked about him a lot during the spring breakout. The guy that can throw over 100 miles an hour. Last year, pitched 3 scoreless innings in Brooklyn, so he has been in a Cyclones uniform before. Jonathan Santucci on the starting pitching side of things. 2nd-round pick out of Duke this past year. He is my preseason pick to be the pitcher of the year for the Mets farm system and really have a breakout season. So it'll be exciting to see what he can do. Dylan Ross gets the nod for opening day. 24-year-old, 6'5" right-hander, also featured in the spring breakout game. He was drafted in the 13th round in 2022 out of Georgia. Has missed the last couple of years after needing Tommy John surgery. He threw 1 inning last year in Port St. Lucie. That's the only inning of his professional career, and he struck out the side on 11 pitches. The fact that he was in spring breakout does speak pretty highly to how the Mets value this guy, and then they give him the nod for the first start of the season. So he is definitely another name to watch. There's plenty more to talk about in Double-A, so I'm going to break down what is left there in Binghamton in just a minute. First, though, a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing better than catching an MLB game live, the crack of the bat, the roar of the crowd, the smell of ballpark food. And if you're looking to go last minute, Gametime makes getting tickets easier than ever with last minute deals, all-in pricing, and the lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the stress out of buying MLB tickets. Plus, ticket prices drop as Gametime gets closer, meaning you could score an incredible deal. When the Mets were in Miami on Monday, I got 2 tickets for myself and my dad, and they were $34 a pop, and we were sitting behind home plate. Could not beat that deal. And again, I grabbed them last minute. I waited till I parked in the garage, and I was walking over to the ballpark. That's when I got my tickets, and I was able to get them in a minute. I mean, it was so quick and easy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. If you're an everyday listener of the show, make sure to become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. And you get a line graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so let's go through the roster in Double-A. Binghamton, Kevin Parada, your primary catcher. We'll see what he does after a disappointing year last year in Binghamton. Ryan Clifford will be your first baseman who will shift out and still play some right field, I am sure, but I'd imagine maybe plays a little bit more at first base than in right. And he is, top 5 prospect in this system. I had Ryan Clifford at number 3, if I'm not mistaken. I have Clifford 3 or Benge 3. Now I'm getting my list confused. I believe I had Clifford 3 and Benge 4. Clifford has the most power in this system. My bold prediction for him is that he was going to be the first Mets prospect since Pete Alonso in 2018 to hit 30 home runs in a season. So we'll see if he can do that in Double-A this year. Full season in Double-A after last year was primarily in Double-A, but he did start the year in Brooklyn last year. Really struggled. They moved him up because that's a tough ballpark to hit in for left-handed batters. Comes up to Binghamton, had a lot of success. He is known for his plate discipline and the ability to draw walks, but I want to see him a little bit more aggressive in the zone this year. Hopefully that would lead to some of those extra home runs. Other side of the diamond in the infield, Nick LaRusso will probably be the primary third baseman in Binghamton. 24-year-old that was drafted in the 9th round in 2023. Had a really good first full season of the system last year. Posted an .834 OPS in 79 games in Brooklyn. Had 11 home runs, 14 doubles, 3 triples. Drove in 42. Even stole 8 bases on 9 attempts. And then got the call up to Binghamton. Didn't play too much there. Didn't have as much success. But hopefully this year he could figure it out. Then you got the number 2 prospect in the Mets system and the best position player prospect, Jett Williams, who starts the season in Double-A. You might wonder, wait a minute, didn't he play in Triple-A last year? But that was only because they were trying to extend his season, and Syracuse played a little bit longer than Binghamton. And since it was a lost year for their top position player prospect, the Mets were just trying to get him games. They had him in the Arizona Fall League. He's healthy. He's ready to go. He will play more center field this year than he has previously. He'll still play some shortstop and some second base. But if you look at the split, in 2023, his last healthy season, he played 91 games at shortstop, 21 in center field. Last year, it was 24 games at short, 5 games at second, 1 game at center field. I would guess it's more of a 50-50 split this year. Might even be 60-40 with the 60 coming in the outfield, because I think the Mets know what they have with Jett Williams in the infield, but also they're sort of projecting out where they might need him on the roster. And if Luis Angel Acuna ends up being your second baseman of the future, well, your middle infield would be locked up. You have Acuna, and of course, no one's going to replace Lindor at shortstop. Beyond that, you have Ronnie Mauricio, you have Brett Beatty, these other guys who are fighting for playing time at second base. Center field is a little more wide open, and the one pathway I would see to Jett Williams being a player for the Mets this season in the big leagues is playing center field. So they need to see if he can actually do that on a consistent basis. So I imagine he's going to get a lot of time in center field. When he's not out there, Nick Morabito will be playing center field. He'll probably have Morabito play some right and some left as well, because he might have the future of being a fourth outfielder. But if he can hit, he could be the center fielder of the future for the New York Mets. Last year, he was the Mets player of the year in the farm system, was unbelievable in St. Lucie, 24 games played, hit nearly 400, 397 average, got on base at a 530 clip. Once he got to Brooklyn, he still performed well, hit 294, got on base at a 373 clip, stole 59 bases off the top of my head, I believe. So that speed is a huge part of his game. The reason why those offensive numbers dipped a little bit from low A to high A, for one, the competition obviously gets steeper from the pitchers you're seeing, but also the defense gets better. And that's what I'm really curious to monitor as Nick Morabito moves along in his minor league career here. This is a guy that gets a lot of infield hits by putting the ball in play and putting on those jets. As the competition gets better and the infielders get better, some of those hits are outs. Once you get to the big leagues, you don't get as many cheap hits as you're going to find in Port St. Lucie. So I am curious to see, can he maintain that batting average? Because the difference between Nick Morabito being a fourth outfielder and the starting center fielder of the New York Mets is, can he hit for a high average? Can he get on base at a high clip? Because if he can, and you pair just getting on base, speed, defense, there is a road to being an everyday player in the big leagues. If not, if you can't get on base, then it's more of a fourth outfielder outlook. But we'll see what he does in Double-A. I am really excited to see Morabito in particular on this roster. The other guy to watch in the outfield is a guy that's losing a lot of that top prospect shine, and that is Alex Ramirez, no longer on the 40-man roster after being on the 40-man roster last year. He was taken off the 40, put on waivers, and ended up coming back to the Mets. So that'll tell you a lot about his standing right now, but he's still young. I mean, you can't completely count him out. How old is Alex Ramirez? My guess is like 22, but you really never know. I could be way off base. I nailed it. 22, turned 22 in January. It could have been anything from 20 to 24, and I wouldn't have been surprised. That's why I ended up saying 22. He's been in the system for a long time now. 2021 was his first year playing games for the Mets in Port St. Lucie. All right, so that covers the outfield. Let's talk about the pitching. Binghamton might have the best rotation in this system right now when it comes to names to watch. You got Jonah Tong and Noel McLean, who I think at this point are the second and third best pitching prospects in this system. Blade Tidwell is there as well, but I think Jonah Tong and Noel McLean are better pitching prospects at this stage. Mind you, I was also going to note, so I'll just say it now since I have brought up his name. Tidwell had a rough second start on Syracuse on Wednesday, allowed 4 runs on 4 hits, 3 walks, struck out 4, did not make it out of the 4th inning. Daniel Nunez pitched in that game, had a strong outing, 2 scoreless, allowed 1 hit, 1 walk, struck out 2, 29 pitches, 20 of them were strikes. He also pitched on Sunday, allowed 1 run in 1 inning pitched with 2 strikeouts. So that's your quick Syracuse Mets update. But getting back to this rotation in Binghamton, Jonah Tong and Noel McLean are definitely names to watch. It's going to be great to see them both have a full season in Double-A. Each got there last year. McLean spent a little more time in Double-A than Jonah Tong did. Tong started last year in Low A, was absolutely lights out, just too dominant to even be at that level, and then was able to hold the zone in High A. McLean started in High A, where he was a two-way player, got to Binghamton, and that's where he eventually gave up hitting. Jack Wenninger is the guy that actually got the nod, though, for the first start of the season. 6th-round pick in 2023, pitched to a 2.12 ERA in 9 starts in Brooklyn last year. His ERA, that sounds a little bit too good to me. Hold on real quick. I got to check that. I might have wrote that wrong. It might have been a 3.12 ERA. I know his ERA in St. Lucie, because of a couple bad starts, was 0 for 5, but it was just a couple really rough outings. He started off the year strong last year, And I did mark that wrong. It was a 3.12 ERA in Brooklyn last year in 43 1/3 innings pitched. 115 innings for Jack Winninger in his first pro season. And again, he gets the first start of the season in Binghamton. He's definitely another guy to keep your eye on. Jonathan Pintaro was someone I talked about after the spring breakout, a guy that Mets signed out of Indy ball last year. Pitched to a 2.68 ERA across high A, double A, and did make one good start on Syracuse last season. He's 27 years old. I imagine he's going to keep pitching out of the rotation. And he's legitimate starter depth for the big league club this year. He's a guy that can pitch well potentially in double A in a couple of starts, and maybe they move him right along to Syracuse if a spot opens up in that rotation. And you never know. I would not be surprised if Jonathan Pintaro found his way up for a spot start this year, just because he's a little bit older and he's not the same type of top prospect like a Blade Tidwell that you might be protecting, or a Brandon Sproat. And if the Mets need an arm, you never know. Also, Joander Suarez is back in double A. 25-year-old, spent last year mostly in double A, pitched to a 3.92 ERA and 120 innings. He is a guy that in 2023 had the no-hitter, which is why he got a little bit of shine back then. But an arm that you never know. He could still potentially be some more starter depth for the Mets this year or next year. Relievers. Trey McLaughlin stands out, 1.90 ERA and 33 1/3 innings pitched last year in double A, and he's right back. Could see him up in Syracuse at some point this season for sure. Douglas Orellana is another name I just want to point out. He pitched to a 1.86 ERA in Brooklyn last year, struck out 49 and 38 2/3 innings pitched, 13 appearances, 9 of them were starts. I don't know how he would get starts with a pretty loaded rotation in Binghamton, but pitching out of bulk relief or however they use him, he's a guy that's got a live arm that'll be interesting to watch. Overall, we will continue to monitor all of these prospects throughout the season. Friday is typically our day for Friday farm reports, but also Saturdays and Sundays throughout the weekend. I'll continue to check in on the farm system, guys who are playing great, guys who aren't, guys who get the promotions, all that good stuff, to keep you locked into all of the future Mets that could make an impact, whether it be on the roster or guys that might end up being dangled out in the trade market at the deadline, the offseason, or anytime beyond that. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you want to follow me on social media, you can do so at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league, by Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube.